Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. It's always great to be at a conference where we open and Mark tells us that technology is changing our world and speaks for a couple of minutes about how technology is changing our world. And then Graham talks to us about how technology is changing our world and uses a couple of really good examples and even steals my joke about more technology being in your smartphone than there was in the whole planet when we sent men to the moon. And I thought I was going to get away with it with Ian, but Ian started talking about Twitter as well. And now we've just seen Google Earth demonstrated. So when Graham talks about technology putting jobs under threat, then I feel it, really. But what I want to do is start off with a picture that whenever I've used it at similar conferences, no one has the faintest idea what this is. Whereas I know in a room full of people in the travel industry, then there must be someone here who sells city breaks to Slovenia, and preferably Ljubljana. Because this is the Ljubljana wheel. This is the first wheel that we have been able to find on planet Earth. It's 3,500 years old. It's not.
It's 5,200.
Sorry, you're quite. It's What I was supposed to say in that was it was found in 3,500 BC. It was made in 3,500 BC, so it's 5,500 years old in total. So we don't disagree. And you may be able to correct me on this as well, but when I last checked, the Ljubljana wheel is under refurbishment, shall we say. So if you actually go to Ljubljana, it's not actually in the City Museum at the moment, but a fascinating thing to have come out of Slovenia. Now, it took us 5,500 years, I now know, it took us 5,500 years to get from that wheel to these wheels. Now, when we talk about technology changing our world in a way that maybe feels faster than perhaps we might immediately think, then 5,500 years to go from that to that, that's a very, very long time. Let's look at another picture. This is the Bletchley Park computer, 1940s, trying to crack the German Enigma codes during the Second World War. Now, I haven't seen anyone that looks so pleased to see me that they've got one of these in their pocket. And yet you've all got something infinitely more powerful, as we've heard today, in your pocket. But what I want to talk about today is that phrase that I think people haven't really got their heads around yet, and that we're going to hear an awful lot more of in the near future. It took us 5,500 years to get from one sort of wheel to another. It took us 50 years to get from one sort of computer to another. If you think of that staircase of innovation going up and up, then the time it takes for us to leap from one step to another is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. We have lived through, if you like, the 2007, that Apple period of suddenly every telephone becoming smart. That was the previous step. The next step that is coming, because believe it or not, at the moment we're in a sort of innovation plateau, the next step that is coming is when those machines start talking to each other. It's when, and we'll come on to more of this later, but it's when we've got a sense that rather than you talking to your phone and your phone telling you stuff that you've asked it, it's when maybe your phone, maybe things that you even wear, are able to second guess what it is you want to know, maybe from a travel perspective, suggest where it is you want to go, without anywhere near as much human interaction as we've got at the moment. Now, I usually put up pictures of Alan Sugar so we can laugh at him, but in this particular instance, I'd like to suggest that Alan Sugar was a bit of a technology pioneer, and maybe still is in some ways. This is Alan Sugar with the Amstrad emailer. And the Amstrad emailer was the first attempt, really, to get a sense of technology, of email being in your home rather than trapped on a mainframe computer. There'd been other sort of attempts to get this going, but Alan Sugar really thought there was a way of putting this into everybody's hands. Now, it didn't really work, but it was really the precursor of that iPhone kind of model. And the reason Alan Sugar is a real genius is because that man is still collecting subscriptions from the few thousand people that still have that Amstrad emailer in their home. So that's how you get rich, ladies and gentlemen. This man made a far greater impact. I don't need to tell you who Steve Jobs is, but what I think is sometimes misunderstood is what Steve Jobs did. He didn't take anything and really build anything that was new. What Steve Jobs did was put together existing pieces of technology and make them comprehensible and desirable for everyone on the planet. That's why there are more than 600 million Apple devices that have been sold. That's why there are more than 1 billion Android mobile phones in the world. That's why there are more than 1.2 billion mobile phone subscriptions in China alone. And the scale of that Chinese market opportunity is something that I know in the travel industry I don't need to emphasize to you. This is another revolution, and what I'm trying to do here is put together some pieces, and we'll bring them together at the end. This is another revolution. This may not immediately look obvious, but this is 3D printing, and what's being built there is a very small statue of a very small person. It's only about that big in real life. But the idea of 3D printing is, rather than going to build a cast of something, if you want to do a prototype of some model, say you're an architect, then you simply upload a design and it gets printed out. Now, Maplins will sell you a 3D printer in their shops. It comes in kit form and you have to build it yourself. Asda will sell you a 3D printer, which doesn't come in kit form. Now, for heaven's sake, unless you really want to make really tiny rubbish objects for your children, don't go and buy one. But what I do want to say is this is a manufacturing revolution. The idea that you can, for instance, there are apps on iPhones that already do this. You can take a picture of a thing from 360 degrees, you can upload it to the internet, and they will send you a copy of that thing instantly. This is something that used to take months. Now it takes literally as long as Royal Mail takes to get it to you, which could still be months, to be fair. This, another piece of the jigsaw. You're going to hear more about wearable technology later on. Now, this is Samsung's Galaxy Gear smartwatch. And what the smartwatch does at the moment is, frankly, not very much. But you can take pictures with it. You can make phone calls with it if you put your arm up to your face like that, which looks a bit weird. You can suddenly start to feel that your mobile phone is not something that you need to constantly be looking at. There was a Nokia advert a few years ago about someone staring at their mobile phone, walking until, of course, they hit a lamppost. Now, this does happen. Nokia, before they started falling apart, have been trying to develop a way of using mobile phones that are much less invasive, much more about something that gives you some information but doesn't constantly have to be pulled out of your pocket. Now, the Galaxy Gear smartwatch is very much about that sort of thing. It means that you can see that you've got an email. It means you can read some of your text messages. It means you can start to get away from the mobile phone. Now, only the kind of egomaniacs that become journalists would put a picture of themselves up on stage during this sort of a presentation. But this is Google Glass, and you will hear more about Google Glass from Google later on, who will, by the time I finished, have even less to talk about than I did when I started. And Google Glass, and I think Google would admit this, Google Glass is not per se the future. We will not all be walking around with spectacles, even if we don't need them, that will be able to show us in a little screen above one eye all those little bits of information that we might wish we were able to find instantly. But one use case, for instance, if you've just arrived at the airport, if you're just carrying your bags, if you really wish you knew where the hell you were going, and of course the signs are never quite where you want them, then Google Glass means you've got your hands free, you can see where you should be going. It's an example of the Internet of Things in some ways, because what it's doing is it's sensing where you are, it's making a second guess at what you're doing, and it's able to say, well, I reckon what you probably want to do is find the exit or find the baggage carousel. And it's about communication from one machine, in this case the Internet, to your own personal device in a way that makes your life simpler and easier. Now, these are some other people using Google Glass, and you'll notice that the lady on the right doesn't look quite as weird as I do, for various reasons. One of them is that she already wears glasses. So you can see how this sort of thing might be integrated into real life. But what you can also see is it's not quite ready for prime time, shall we say, because the guy who is using his phone to film her is also wearing Google Glass. Now, if this were intuitive technology, he'd probably be filming her with Google Glass because it's got a built-in camera. So this is not the technology that we will see. This is, in this case, Google, there are lots of other companies doing it, nudging towards a future that says this is how the internet connects to your real life. It's not something that you look at your laptop or your phone to suddenly work out that there's a question you knew the answer to and you've got to go and look up, there's a question that you wanted an answer to and you've got to go and look up the answer. It's about second guessing what we want to do. This is another example of the proper Internet of Things. This is a company called Kobachi. They make plant sensors. And what this plant sensor does is it sits, I don't have quite such a photogenic window box as this, but it sits in a window box. It will text you or alert you in an app that your daisies are drying out or could do with fertilizer or whatever. Now, it's a niche use case. There are most people that would notice whether their plants are drying out. But imagine a world where this plant sensor is automatically connected, let's say in a hotel, to the watering system. Suddenly, those guys going around manually watering stuff are simply redundant. And when you get to a world where the internet is connected to the fabric of buildings, to the fabric of our lives, then suddenly we see a new industrial revolution. And that's the revolution that I think we'll be coming to next. What we haven't talked about yet is any sort of social element to this. Now, it's very easy to say that, for instance, when everyone is wearing Google Glass, then it will be very easy, if they see something they don't like, to tweet a picture of it and tell the world how unhappy they are. That already happened. Everyone's got a mobile phone. Everyone knows from TripAdvisor how easy it is to explain how grumpy you are. But what I want to suggest from Facebook is that what they're much more interested in is working out what you like now, because a lot of people tell Facebook what they like already, and then starting to much more intelligently second guess where that goes next. So if you've already told Facebook that you like Star Wars, the two things that they can start thinking is, one, what are you going to like next? Because they know a lot more about you than simply the fact that you like Star Wars. But also, if you're the advertiser behind Star Wars, why don't you go to that person and say, well, actually, if you tweet about or if you put on Facebook our next product, then we will give you a free ticket to go and see it, or we will give you a free DVD. It's about connecting the dots, and it's about using a sort of social layer on top of an Internet of Things. And what I want to do finally is talk about what will probably be the single biggest revolution that I think we will see far, far quicker than you might expect. And this, again, is Google. And this is a Google driverless car. You can see on the number plate there is the symbol for infinity. It's from Nevada, and they've given driverless cars their own dedicated type of number plate. And everyone sort of assumes that the nirvana of driverless cars is all about simply getting into the car, it takes you where you want to go, your car, it just improved. Now, I want to suggest a couple of things about what driverless cars do, because they are, in a sense, the ultimate example of the Internet of Things. Now, the first thing about a driverless car is Google have already done all of the mapping for most of the planet. They already know where those driverless cars are going to want to go. They already know, because they've got the data of typical journeys, how people use their cars. And the single biggest thing they know is that people don't use their cars enough. I can predict that almost all of your cars, if they're not at some long-term airport parking facility, they're probably sat outside your house doing remarkably little. As an asset, this is the single most wasted thing on the planet, except for people that have several houses, but we can ignore those. And what Google, I think, are nudging towards with this is a vehicle industry where actually you and I don't own our own cars. We don't need our own cars. What we need is access to transport. And so you can imagine, not too far away, and it's no wonder that the automotive industry is rather frightened of this, you can imagine a world where there are fleets essentially of taxis that are permanently able to go from journey to journey to journey, and yet because of the scale and because of the volume of data, then we know exactly where those cars are at any given moment, and we can roughly guess where they're going to want to be next. This isn't particularly about you or I flagging down a driverless car on the street, although that will be a bit of an option. It's about those cars talking to each other so that, of course, when they're on the motorway, they don't crash into the back of each other, because they're a lot cleverer than we are about not crashing into the back of each other. But it's far more about understanding where they are, where they're going to need to be next, and being just round the corner when you suddenly realize that you want to go to the supermarket. And that will feel like witchcraft, but in practice, it's just about one machine communicating with another machine on a scale that we simply haven't thought possible. So what I want to leave you with, if you like, is a sense of machine talking to machine in a way that we have not previously thought possible, in a way that, where Ian mentioned earlier that people just want the government to leave them alone. I think a huge number of people increasingly feel, I certainly know my wife does, that she wants all the technology to leave her alone. Sky Plus made things a lot easier than it was before. You didn't have to press the button on the video recorder. It's all about technology getting out of the way. And what I think we're going to see in a world of machine-to-machine communication in this euphemistically called Internet of Things is a world where it's very easy for large companies to aggregate vast volumes of data so that they can predict human behavior, because most human behavior is pretty predictable. You can go to Bristol, and they've already started to to connect benches, inanimate objects, and at the moment it's just a game, but 25,000 people have sent text messages to park benches in Bristol. And some of that is about playing a game. It's about trying to build a community. It's about trying to say, this is a bench that is here. This is an underutilized resource. They've had people asking mailboxes questions about when the last deliveries are. That's, again, nudging towards a world where every single object is connected, where every piece of granular information is known about that object and is accessible to you if you want to find it out, but also is probably coming to you whether you like it or not. And I want to end with a quote from Eric Schmidt, who at the time was the chief executive of Google, is now the executive chairman. I'm not quite sure what the difference is. One of the things that he said about the internet was, you're never lost, you're never lonely, you're never bored, and you're never out of ideas. Now, what we're going to see is that kind of internet, because I don't think that most of us feel that the web has really set us free. For an awful lot of people, what being online all the time has done has mean that you're never out of the office. You've always got your emails in your pocket. You've always got that computer, infinitely more powerful than Bletchley Park, sat with you, whether you like it or not. Whereas, what an Internet of Things does is it tries to annihilate all of the stuff that is really, really boring, like driving, like watering your plants. And if you don't want to be part of it, then I've got two messages. One is that you don't have to. Is no one is forcing you to put information on Facebook. No one is encouraging you out of your digital cave, but there are real incentives to do so, and we will see more and more incentives to do so, whether that is the ability to not have to buy a car, or whether that is the ability to get free stuff on Facebook. But the other final message is this stuff is coming, whether we like it or not. You heard from Graham earlier about how it will change businesses, about digital natives. All of that is absolutely true. And the one crucial thing about that is if we do not embrace this, if we pretend that we can push driverless cars away because they're only relevant in Nevada where there's this number plate, if we pretend that we can ignore all the Twitter revolution that played such a crucial part in the Middle East, then we will get left behind. And those 1.2 billion people with mobile phones in China who have grown up with this stuff, who have no idea what Bletchley Park was because the only computer they've ever known is the one in their pocket, that will be the market that will surge ahead, and we will all get left behind. Thank you very much.